Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. So I rise to take note of answers to questions about cuts to disability education funding. And despite the questions that Labor put today, the question which the apprentice working under the fixer, Senator Birmingham, couldn't answer was why then are parents here today? Why are parents with children with disability here in the parliament today? Well, I can answer that question. They're here because funding has been cut to their schools and to their children's education. And if we want equality of opportunity, it means that some people need more support to get through the education system than others, and that's a fair thing because we do want all of our children, regardless of their circumstance, to succeed at school. So when Labor was in government, we achieved a bipartisan commitment to the introduction of a disability loading as part of the national education reform, and that was for the 2015 school year. And this promise reflected Australia's commitment to progressing the rights and equal opportunities of people with disability. And of course, because the Abbott team was so desperate to get elected, they made promise after promise, none of which have been kept, all of which have been broken. And of course, that promise to bipartisanship on funding to students with disability went by the wayside. It just disappeared and went by the wayside. And that is why we have parents here today, parents with their children, to really push home that message to the Abbott government that this is not fair, that the funding that was promised, the bipartisanship that was promised, should be something the government commits to. And there'll be weasel words and they'll wriggle and they'll carry on and they'll talk about Labor because, of course, they can't talk about their own policies because their own policies clearly are about cuts. They are about cuts. Otherwise, why would parents be here? They're here because they are seeing firsthand that that bipartisan approach is now broken. Like the PM's promise, it is broken. And it will affect around 100,000 students. Why would the Abbott government disadvantage 100,000 students to make sure that they get a good education? But no, they're just pawns in the game, like everyone else. Pensioners, our health system, on and on the list goes, and children with disability are the latest pawns in the Abbott government's litany of broken promises. And of course children with disability face a severe disadvantage at school, a limited choice of school, discrimination, bullying, limited or no funding for support and resources, sometimes not appropriate access to trained staff, and having to contend with a culture of low expectations. And where will the money come from to support those children at school? Does the Abbott government seriously think that parents have to put their hand in their pocket, or somehow those schools that can twist their funding and put a little bit more money the way of children with disabilities? Is that what the coalition government expects? And certainly in my state of Western Australia, where the state government has imposed the most severe cuts we've seen in the history of education in Western Australia, this just puts those students with disadvantage at a much worse state. And we have schools in Western Australia, high schools that have lost $1 million in funding, primary schools in the most disadvantaged areas missing $500,000. Well, of course that equates to staff numbers. Of course that equates to the amount of time that you can give to children with disability or any other disadvantaged group in the school. And now, on top of this, the broken promise from the Abbott government, the throwing away of the bipartisanship of children with disability, is also part of that legacy that will take years and years in my state of Western Australia, and I imagine right across the country, to address. That's the reason we have parents in the parliament today. That's the reason we have children with disability here today, staring in the face of the Abbott government, making sure that the Abbott government absolutely understands that their broken promise
Order, Senator,
to
your
education
time has expired.